This fall, I set out on the journey of rereading all of the Realm of the Elderlings books by Robin Hobb. So, of course, I wanted to celebrate this in some way and help to keep me on track with my reread, and I thought, what better way than to post a full-on discussion video for each Hobb book as I finish them. So today I'm coming to you guys with my discussion of Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Hello everyone, it is Samantha and I hope you guys are having a lovely day today. As I said in the intro, I have been rereading Robin Hobb's books. I just started at the end of August and I am hoping to power through a good chunk of them before the new year. Probably will not end up reading all 16, but I'm going to at least try and read half. Naturally, I had to start out with Assassin's Apprentice, as this is what kicks off the Realm of the Elderlings saga, and today I am coming to you guys with my full discussion of this book. So, full disclosure, this video will have spoilers for Assassin's Apprentice, so if you have not read Assassin's Apprentice yet and you're looking for a review, I will link my review down below because I have in fact left a spoiler-free review of not only Assassin's Apprentice but the Farseer trilogy in general. So if you're curious to check it out below. But this video is definitely going to have spoilers for Assassin's Apprentice, so you have been warned. I also am going to be talking about a few things that are referenced in this book that don't make sense until you read all of the books. So that will contain spoilers for the remaining books in the Realm of the Elderlings. But I will warn you before I spoil you. So that way you can like click off or what have you and you won't be spoiled. So don't worry if you haven't read the rest of the Realm of the Elderlings series, then I will protect you from being spoiled. So as you guys know, Assassin's Apprentice is what kicks off the story of Fitz and the Fool. This book follows Fitz from the age of about 6 years old when he was dumped off by his biological grandfather at the doorstep of a fort that is supposed to house his father, Chivalry, who is the king in waiting, and his uncle, Verity. So he ends up basically saying, I don't want this kid, y'all are gonna have to take care of him. He dumps Fitz, the rest is history. Fitz ends up getting taken in by his uncle and put in the care of Burke, who was his father, Chivalry's right-hand man. So Burke basically ends up raising Fitz to be kind of a stable hand, and his raising into hand. Fitz doesn't ever end up meeting his father. He ends up growing up basically under the care of Burke, and soon, when he's about the age of 8 or 9, he comes to the attention of the king. The king claims him and then tasks him with learning to become the king's newest assassin under the care of the current assassin, Shade. So this is really where Fitz's story kind of takes off. This is definitely setting up for all of the books. Fitz grows up in this book from the ages of 6 to 15. He kind of finds his own. He starts to learn not only about becoming an assassin, but also just various other things that you learn as a young boy. So this definitely is a setup book for all of Robin Hobb's books to come. We do see a little bit of the Fool in this book, though definitely not as much as you do in later books. So definitely the beginning of Fitz's story. So coming back into this world, I felt very much like coming home. I just forgot how much I missed these characters, how much I enjoyed the story and the characters, and how rich and vivid the world is that Hobb paints. Everything that she writes is very, very vivid. Hobb is very, very good at describing things and creating a very vivid picture of the world that these characters reside in, which I personally love. I love rich, detailed books where you can almost feel and taste everything that is going on. It just really invokes a strong emotion in the reader, which is one of my favorite things about Robin Hobb's books. And that hasn't changed. I remember that when I first read her books. Upon rereading it, I still get that same feeling. So there's definitely a lot to take in. I read these books slower than I do other books because there's just so much detail and so many things going on that they are slower reads, but that doesn't mean they're bad. I love it. I love how much detail she puts in every paragraph. And as with any reread, you pick up on a lot more than you did the first time you read it. Even the second or third time you read it, because I've actually read Assassin's Apprentice, I think this is like the third or fourth time, and I always pick up something new each time I read it, or something, or a scene just feels a bit more poignant or has just a little bit more feeling than it did the first time or the second time that I read it. Among these would be just how much Burke loves Fitz and how much Fitz doesn't see it. It's almost frustrating while you're reading it because Fitz just thinks that he's a burden to Burke and that Burke almost resents him. But when you reread this book, especially with the context of later books, you know just how much Burke loves Fitz. He cares for him. He isn't the best about showing his emotions and probably showing how much he cares, but a lot of the things that Fitz takes for resentment is pretty clear is actually Burke just loving and caring for Fitz so much, like he was his own son. So all those times that Fitz was like, Burke hates me, he resents me, and I'm like, no, he loves you. He loves you like a son, Fitz. But it's hard because Fitz is very much a very forlorn and kind of sad and lonely character. He doesn't feel like he has anybody he can go to, which is understandable because he's the royal bastard. There's a lot of people who would want to kill him or use him as a weapon, and he really can't trust anybody. And that would be a lonely, lonely place, especially for a young boy. To show up at this castle, you don't know anybody, you're 6 years old, everybody's talking about you, people are casting you sidelong glances and being rude to you because they look at you as the reason for why your father abdicated the throne. It would just be a really lonely place to be for a boy. And Burke is a very intimidating character, so I can see how he would have grown up thinking that Burke hated him because, you know, as much as I love Burke, he's definitely not the best at showing his emotions or showing people that he cares. So I can definitely see how Fitz kind of grew up just feeling lonely and like nobody cared about him. Especially when it's ingrained in you at such a young age, I think that's part of the reason why it just stuck with him his whole life. I actually had somebody recently share a theory with me that they had heard about, and I honestly never thought about it, but it makes so much sense. So if you've read Assassin's Apprentice, you will remember that Shrewd ends up claiming Fitz. Shrewd, of course, is the king of the Farseer line. So he ends up claiming Fitz when he's about 10 years old and having him be trained as a royal assassin. But if you're in that scene when he first notices Fitz, which is under the table in the Great Hall, he's just playing with the dogs and eating scraps off the table. And Shrewd ends up, you know, paying attention to him. He really notices him and he kind of calls him forth from under the table. And Shrewd says, "Now you are mine," he said, "and made that claiming to me more important than any blood we shared. You need not eat any man's leavings. I will keep you, and I will keep you well. If any man or woman ever seeks to turn you against me by offering you more than I do, then come to me and tell me of the offer, and I shall meet it. You will never find me a stingy man, nor be able to cite ill use as a reason for treason against me. Do you believe me, boy?" I nodded in the mute way that was still my habit, but his steady brown eyes demanded more. "Yes, sir." "Good. I will be issuing some commands regarding you. See that you comply with them. If any seem strange to you, speak to Burke or to myself. Simply come to the door of my chamber and show that pin. You will be admitted." I glanced down at the red stone that winked in the nest of silver. "Yes, sir," I managed again. "Ah," he said softly, and I sensed a trace of regret in his voice and wondered what it was for. His eyes released me, and suddenly I was once more aware of my surroundings, of the puppies in the Great Hall and Regal watching me with fresh distaste on his face, the fool nodding enthusiastically in his vacant way. Then the king stood. When he turned away, a chill went over me as if I had suddenly shed a cloak. It was my first experience of the skill at the hands of a master. So Shrewd basically used his power to skill something into Fitz. Now, if you're aware of the story at this point, you'll know that the skill has the power to influence men's actions, affect their memories, affect what they do. It just basically messes with a person's mind. So it's pretty clear at this point that Shrewd skilled something into Fitz. And now, the theory that people have proposed, and I actually can see quite plausible, is that Shrewd ended up kind of embedding this sense of loneliness, like truly into him. Like I think Fitz already felt it and he took that and he kind of solidified it because this would have prevented Fitz from forging relationships that could be detrimental to the crown and to Shrewd himself. And I could definitely see Shrewd doing that. He very clearly skilled something into Fitz, whether it be blocking his memories of his mother and his childhood before he came under the care of Verity and Burke, which again has also been a theory that has been proposed. I can see all of these things being very plausible. We never really quite figure out what it was that Shrewd did with his skill when he had that encounter with Fitz, but I find all of these theories that have been proposed to be quite plausible. Clearly something very significant happened that kind of shaped the rest of Fitz's behavior and his future as a young man. The other thing that I thought was interesting about this book is that in addition to becoming introduced to the skill, we also get introduced to the wit, which is another power that Fitz is capable of, which means he has power to converse with animals and bond with an animal. In this case, Fitz has an affinity for dogs. What's interesting to me is that we really don't explore it in this book. We know that Fitz is capable of this power. We know that Burke frowns upon it and ends up kind of driving a wedge between him and Fitz, but we never really get to see the full capacity of the wit. And even when Fitz is using the wit in this book, it's not quite described as in much depth as it is in the later books. Like when he's talking animals, we don't get to hear what the animals are saying back, whereas in the later books, Robin Hobb really kind of brings forth the dialogue from the animal's perspective. So you can know what Fitz is saying to the animal, and you can know what the animal's replying. And I just noticed that it's not very as well developed in this book, which I found to be really interesting, particularly having read the future books where you get to see the wit in full use, and then kind of having this book just kind of slowly introduce us to the concept of it, but not really fully delve into all it can do. When I first read this book, I never actually thought that much about chivalry, which of course is Fitz's father. He was a king in waiting. He was the oldest son of Shrewd. But upon rereads, I always think more about chivalry and why he did what he did. So when he became aware of Fitz's existence, he ended up abdicating the throne, ended up retiring to a manor with his wife and just kind of living out the rest of his life. Now, I always wondered why he abdicated. Why didn't he just recognize Fitz as a son? I know that we're given, you know, insight into chivalry's character, that he would have been ashamed and would not have felt like he could lead the people at this point. And that may be true, but I do feel like there was a little bit more to chivalry's reason for abdicating. I feel like maybe he wanted Fitz to have a chance. I think if he wouldn't have abdicated, Fitz would have had to have died. And I think that he truly cared so much for Fitz and the fact that he had a son that he abdicated the throne in order to protect Fitz and never had any contact with him until his death, so that Fitz could survive and have a life for himself. And I don't know, maybe this is just me being optimistic. We'll never really know because Robin Hobb never blatantly says, you know, why he abdicated, just people's opinions on why he abdicated. But I like to think that he did it for Fitz, that he did it so Fitz could have a life, and that even though he never truly met Fitz, that he did in fact love him. Which of course brings us to chivalry's death, where all we know about his death is that he fell off a horse and he died. And nobody, including Fitz and Shade, believes this. I don't believe this. I think he was murdered by Regal. I think he was murdered by Regal's plotting because he was, you know, just trying to eliminate another person that could still be in the path to the throne, because Regal, of course, had ambitions. It's just another example of we'll never quite know all the answers, but I definitely don't think that chivalry just fell off his horse and died. I think he was, in fact, murdered, and this was the fate that he was trying to protect Fitz from. Another scene that I found very heart-wrenching in this book was when Fitz is still young, between 10 and 12, and Shade and Shrewd test him. So Shade had tasked him with stealing a knife from the king. Fitz doesn't want to do it because it's betraying his king, but he doesn't want to betray his mentor, and so he's just tormented, and he soon starts to be ostracized by Shade, and he just can't find his place in life anymore because he had a father figure in Shade. He felt like he cared for him, and then just to have it ripped off and have no contact, it just really, really affected him. And you really get insight into Fitz's loneliness and how much he craved having a parental figure in his life and just knowing that somebody cared for him. And that scene where Shrewd and Shade finally cave and they, you know, let him know that he was being tested is like, poor Fitz. It's so sad. And you can really just see how much Shade loves and cares for Fitz when he, you know, just holds him in bed and tells him it's going to be okay. And it's like, so sad. You can just see how much Shade cares for Fitz, and I don't think he cares any more or less than Burke, but Shade is better about showing his emotions and feelings, so Fitz can really see that somebody does in fact care for him, more than just as a tool. The other part of this book that I found so frustrating was when Fitz was trying to learn the skill from Galen. I hate Galen so much. I hate him. He ruined the skill for Fitz because, you know, he skilled and pressed in him that he couldn't use the skill, and so Fitz could have been extremely powerful from the get-go in his skilling. He could have been consistent. He probably could have been amazing. And then Galen had to ruin it all and try and get him to kill himself. And I hate that scene, but I love it when Burke kicks his ass. It's like, yes. And Fitz still doesn't get just how much Burke cares about him. He assumes it's just a matter of honor. And it's like, Fitz, he did it because he loves you, and Galen pissed him off because he kicked the crap out of you. And I just love the fact that Burke kicked his ass because he had it coming. And speaking of Galen, I like that we don't know until the end that he is in fact the Queen's bastard, which I find rich that Regal and him are so close when Regal wants to, you know, talk about how the bastards are a disgrace to the line, and I'm like, well, your perfect little saintly mother wasn't so perfect, now was she? I also wonder how much that final plot at the end of the book of Regal trying to steal Verity's power and kill Fitz, how much of it was Galen's idea and how much of it was Regal? They definitely seem to be in cahoots with each other, and I always kind of wondered who was the mastermind in that scenario, because Galen wasn't as stupid as he seemed, and he was definitely vindictive, and they shared a mother. So I could definitely see Galen kind of having some influence over Regal, and you can definitely see Regal become more and more reckless in the later books once Galen is out of the picture. So while the plan may not have been all of Galen's, I definitely think Galen had some influence and power over Regal and that he could rein him in, keep him focused, and keep him from being reckless, because in Royal Assassin, Regal really goes off the rails. So now at the end of the video, I kind of want to talk about some things that are foreshadowed in this book or don't make any sense until you have read the other books. So I'm going to put a spoiler message up here, and once you see it go away, you'll know I'm done talking about spoilers. So if you haven't finished reading all of Robin Hobb, or at least through Fool's Fate, then don't watch this part of the video because you will be spoiled. But there is one scene at the beginning of this book that meant nothing to me when I first read it. And then after you read Fool's Fate, it is such a powerful scene, and it invokes so much emotion, and it's so hard to read. So in Fool's Fate, you end up seeing Fitz reclaim some of the memories that he put in Girl on a Dragon from his childhood. And when he reclaimed those memories, he remembered that his name was Kepit. That was the name that his mother gave him. He wasn't Fitz Chivalry. His real true name that he was born with was Kepit. So there's a scene where Fitz is allowed to go into the market to run errands. Shade has clearly orchestrated this so he can have some time alone by himself out in the town and kind of hang out with his town friends. So Fitz is kind of in the market claiming these items that he needs to on his list, and there is this scene. So Fitz is on the hunt for some nuts that he needs on his list, and he says, "But I find them alongside baskets of porcupine quills and carved wooden beads and nut cones and pounded bark fabric. The woman who presided over the blanket was old, and her hair had gone silver rather than white or gray. She had a strong, straight nose, and her eyes were on bony shelves over her cheeks. It was a racial heritage both strange and oddly familiar to me, and a shiver walked down my back when I suddenly knew she was from the mountains." Now, if you remember, this is where Fitz's mother and grandfather resided. They were from the mountains. They were from the mountain people because that's where chivalry was trying to forge an alliance with. So then the scene continues. "Kepit," said the woman. And the next mat, as I completed my purchase, I glanced at her thinking she was addressing the woman I had just paid, but she was staring at me. "Kepit," she said, quite insistently, and I wondered what it meant in her language. It seemed a request for something, but the older woman only stared coldly out into the streets. So I shrugged at her younger neighbor apologetically and turned away as I stowed the nuts in my basket. I hadn't gone more than a dozen steps when I heard her shriek, "Kepit," yet again, and I looked back to see the two women engaged in a struggle. The older one gripped the younger one's wrists, and the younger one thrashed and kicked to be free of her. Around her, other merchants were getting to their feet in alarm and snatching their own merchandise out of harm's way. I might have turned back to watch had not another familiar face met my eyes. "Nosebleed," I exclaimed. So at this point, he just doesn't even pay attention to it anymore because he's noticed Molly, who he has a crush on, and then the scene kind of takes off with him and Molly. When you read Fool's Fate, and then you reread that, and you realize that was his freaking mother. His mother. It was his mother. It was like, Fitz, that was your mother, and he doesn't even realize it. He doesn't realize it because he keeps talking about how he doesn't have any memories before the time that he was dumped at, you know, on Berwick's care. So, which is why there's that theory that Shrewd kind of suppressed his early memories, so he wouldn't have any memory of his family up in the mountains, which I could in fact see. That's something that Shrewd would very much do. So it's so heartbreaking because he doesn't realize his mother is like 2 feet away from him, and his poor mother, seeing her son like 6 years later, you know, he's a young man, he's almost a teen, and he doesn't recognize her. That would be so heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because he doesn't realize it's his mother, and his mother's heart is probably breaking because she's probably missed her son, and he doesn't recognize her. Like, that is so heartbreaking. And I just love how Robin Hobb weaves these stories, though, because that scene means nothing until you go back to the book. Like, I didn't even remember that scene when I was reading Fool's Fate until I started rereading these books, and I was like, oh my god. And that is why I love Robin Hobb's writing. And the final kind of spoilery thing I want to talk about, which isn't a major spoiler, is the tapestry in Fitz's room of the Elderlings. This is our first hint into the Elderlings and what they are. This tapestry definitely plays a bigger role into the future books. It's not necessarily an accurate representation of the Elderlings, as we soon come to know in the later books, but it's definitely the first little hint of foreshadowing, because he notices the tapestry in the room he's given and how creepy it is. And I'm like, well, Fitz, it's gonna have a lot more of an influence on your life than you think. Alright, so that pretty much sums up all of my thoughts I had while I was rereading Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. There is definitely a lot to these books. There's a lot going on. She just weaves a lot of Easter eggs into it, and I love that about her writing. They're definitely very thought-provoking, and they definitely get me thinking, and I just love it so much. So those are all of the thoughts that I had on my reread. If you guys have anything you'd like to add or discuss in the comments, please feel free to do so, because I always love talking about these books. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Until next time, happy reading. Bye!